What was the most memorable thing your class clown ever did? This guy called Wigger threw homemade gummy bears on the wall whenever the teacher had his back to the class. One landed on the projector and slowly began to melt. The whole projection turned blue. Teacher freaked out. Then there was this case where he kicked an empty water bottle down the staircase. We were in the top floor, and it hit the principal on the ground floor right in the face. Bit late and I'm sure it won't get seen, but there was a gentleman named Angelo in my high school who got the name Jello. Jello was never a good kid and actually dropped out and somehow got back into school. He was 18 in a class full of sophomores and was at the same maturity level. Anyway, Jello was known for smoking in the bathrooms and many teachers wouldn't let him go. One day he tries to sign out to use the restroom and the teacher wouldn't let him. I crap you not, this kid sat in the back of the class at his desk and crap his pants. Didn't say a word until it was smelt, and then looks at the teacher and goes, "Well, Mr. Walsh, I told you I had to take a crap." I have never laughed so hard in my life and I will never find anything as hilarious as a 18-year-old giving the teacher a smug look with a pants full of crap. Like many high schools, our school voted for seniors in various categories like most likely to succeed, cutest couple, etc. This was mainly for the yearbook. I was an 8th grader when this happened because our school put 8th graders in the high school. Tim, a popular senior, won in the best legs category. We had an assembly where the winning seniors were called to the middle of the gym and given a token gift that represented the category that they won in. Tim's gift was a pair of pantyhose. In front of the whole school and standing next to the principal, Tim took the pantyhose, spread them and feigned cunnilingus. All of us kids were laughing it up in the bleachers. The principal wasn't too happy and Tim was suspended for the last few days of his senior year. In retrospect, that was not the most outrageous thing that happened in school that year. That was the last year of our school's slave auction during homecoming week. The slave auction consisted of the cheerleaders and football players being auctioned off to act as the purchasing student slave for the day. They would have to carry their books to class, clean your locker, etc. It was very popular. The next year a new principal came in and retired the slave auction. The students were up in arms at the time because it was a pretty popular thing during homecoming. The fricked up thing was our school was at least 20% black. Now when I think about this, it's just like WTF. This was the 1980s BTW in the Midwest. The last like explains everything. Source: from Iowa. I forget what he was accused of, but he curled up like an evil scientist and responded, "Of course not. I'm a good little boy." Crack. The back snaps right off of the chair he was sitting in, and there he is, back flat on the floor, but still up there on the seat. That's some divine intervention right there. Got up in the middle of midterm exams in senior year English class, gathered all his books and papers from under his desk and neatly gathered them into a nice stack in his arms, and ran straight into a wall with a magnificent screech. He was then promptly, and calmly, told to go to the principal's office. Never said much about it, other than that he thought it'd be funny. "Hey shiners, dare me to eat this." He then holds up a chunk of raw cow's heart. We were in year 10 biology dissecting animal hearts, and proceeds to eat it. He then turns pale green, throws up on himself, runs out of the lab and doesn't come back. He was a clown bully, so it was extra special. That's how you know that sucker was batshit crazy. Didn't even get dared to eat a heart. Maybe he's a freaking Dothraki. This was a 2-person job, but one created a distraction to occupy the substitute teacher, while the other changed the videotape from some Bulls History Channel video that you always watch when there's a sub, to a porno. We only got to watch the P for about 45 seconds, but it was enough for me to finish twice. Oh, that's a good one. Drilled industrial bolts on top of the school and hung one of those giant material signs over the front stating class of XXXX with everyone's signature on it. Plus dongs. Lots and lots of dongs. Grabbed teacher's pen off the overhead projector when she turned her back. He stood up in front of the entire class and immediately shoved it down his pants and wiped it all over his dong balls for a good 5 seconds. Then placed it back on the overhead and sat down. Within 30 seconds, teacher picked it up and was chewing on it. Class freaking lost it. During an end of year awards ceremony, our class clown, with the help of a few friends, got into the principal's office with a tape measure. They measured the area of the floor of his office and drew a map of it on a piece of paper. They then went out to the soccer pitch and measured out the same area there. They rolled up the grass and carted it all back to the office. Some of the guys had been clearing out the office in the meantime, and while the grass was rolled out on the floor of the now empty office, the others, using the previously mentioned map, relayed the office out on the soccer pitch, right down to the dead ficus at the window. They knew they had time, as these ceremonies infamously went on for about 3 or 4 hours. Those who witnessed the principal's reaction said they genuinely thought he was gonna have a heart attack. He must have known who did it, but short of bringing in the cops to dust for prints, there was no way he could prove it. TLDR. Some guys emptied the principal's office and recreated it on the soccer pitch. Our senior prank was to pour instant concrete mix next to all of the doors to the school and put a pitcher of water next to it, so if someone opened the door, the pitcher would spill and mix with the concrete. Harmless, right? Well, it rained that night after they placed everything down. Our school was closed for 3 days while they tried to figure out what to do, since none of the doors would open far enough to let anyone in. One swing of a sledgehammer would have done the job. He would sing Rihanna songs obnoxiously loud whenever he could, in the middle of class, in the hallways, in the bathroom. It didn't help that he was actually pretty good. My heaviest memory from first grade: a girl named Brooke pulled her skirt down, got on one of the tables, and started singing and dancing to the chicken dance while everyone in the class watched. She then ran away from the teacher, who was obviously trying to catch her, by jumping to the other tables like Indiana Jones on top of a train. Not saying he was the class clown per se, but his attitude and antics were memorable to me, along with his close friend being in close contention for the title of clown all around frickabout, so if he reads this, he'll know that I'm talking about him. I don't know how to put this, so I'll just say it. He swallowed a spoon. A promotional spoon, mind you. The brightly colored plastic kind from a Fruit Loops cereal box that made to entice 2-year to eat more form molded sugar, so the size was nearing wide and teaspoon territory. A few days later he said he passed it when I asked, which was the funniest mental image for me then and still makes me smirk thinking about that day now. But anyways, we're sitting in math class learning about frickle with me riding the rear row, and Goofball sitting 2 rows over on my left near the wall. He was minding his own business, most likely doodling, sketching, but for some reason he was sucking on some short-handled spoon for half the class that I'm sure he pulled out of a cereal box sometime earlier. I don't know what event led up to the how, but I start to hear someone briefly choking, followed by a gulp and a gasp, and when I looked up, I see his face turned with a look of complete terror and heard him quietly shout, "I swallowed it," in total shock. Dear Jesus, dude. Just how? I know your eyes were serious in the moments of contemplation following such a foreign event, but a freaking spoon? In the middle of math class? I could not stop laughing, and nothing could have been funnier than that moment for me all year. But that time you guys stole a cart from the grocery store on your way back from lunch and rode in it with your friend pushing you past the class you guys were supposed to be in will be a close second. God dang, you guys were funny retards. Guy called himself Pond Life, generally just screamed out of nowhere to make people jump, would dance on tables, hide under them, would walk up to the teacher at their desk and just stare blankly at them, etc. General odd but funny stuff. One day we have a rather old, overweight, ball breaker of a substitute science teacher. He's making everyone sit in silence and go over textbook work. Boring as frick. Pond Life's having none of this. As the sub is walking round, looking over people's shoulders, he gets up and starts silently stalking him around the room like some retarded Velociraptor. He's done a full lap of the room and the sub hasn't noticed. People are snickering and trying to hold in laughter and keep quiet. Every time the sub looks around, Pond Life ducks behind a desk or a person. He's gaining ground. Each row the sub walks, he increases his proximity until his crowning moment arrives. The sub, at the end of a row, bends down to pick something up. Pond Life's primal genes kick in and he goes for the kill. Sprinting towards the now stooped over sub, he launches himself through the air screaming "Pundli I," landing on the sub's back as he starts to rise. He tries to flee, but Pond Life's got him in a full body grip, arms around the shoulders, legs around the waist. He's now riding the sub. Jada pond life and random noises fill the air for not a moment of riding, but at least 3-4 minutes. The sub is too weak and out of shape to remove the scrawny rider, instead calls out to the class to fetch another teacher. Pond Life's tired mount lies front first onto a table as he can no longer support his rider's weight. All the while Pond Life screams his battle cries. The head of Depth rushes in and has to physically pull Pond Life off the sub. The hallway outside the room is now filled with onlookers as Pond Life is marched out of the room and off into obscurity. This was his last, final hurrah. Never saw him in school again. This happened at junior high graduation. After our principal gave a motivational speech about how we essentially would amount to nothing. The class clown's last name started with a Z, so he was the last one to receive his diploma. After they called his name, he pulled off his belt, whipped it around his head and threw it into the crowd. Brock shaved his eyebrows off so he would get elected for student council. It was on his campaign signs. He had no interest in student government and it was simply a joke to him. He got elected. Brows came off. He had super bushy brows, and this was in August, so he had eyebrow tan lines, which made it kind of creepy. Oh, middle school. Plastered our high school with posters for a lost pet that went by the name Jamus. The pet in the picture was a freaking fish. Also managed to get a hold of an entire roll of twin mattress stickers and plastered those all over the school, too, even on students. One of the teachers still has the lost fish poster in his classroom, 4 years later. End of year slave auction. Brought an actual prostitute and latex gear and apparently they had sex in the bathrooms. School didn't bother suspending him. Our class clown, let's call him Jimmy, used to do bizarre but hilarious stuff. One day, toward the end of our senior year, Jimmy was sitting in physics class. The teacher, let's call him Mr. Chill, was incredibly cool, the kind you'd actually want to be friends with outside school. He was brilliant, fun, and very down to earth. You could get away with a lot in Mr. Chill's class. On this particular day, as Mr. Chill is lecturing, he notices Jimmy's backpack rustling out of the corner of his eye. It's subtle, but just enough to catch his attention as he tries to get the students excited about thermodynamics. Thinking nothing of it at first, though, he continues on with the lecture. A few minutes later, however, the rustling backpack becomes impossible to ignore. Something's up, and Mr. Chill wants to investigate. He concludes his lecture and gives the class something to work on so he can discreetly investigate the source of the motion in the backpack. Mr. Chill, knowing what may well be coming, casually strolls up to Jimmy's desk. Ahem. Jimmy? Yeah, Mr. Chill? Having been quite the clown himself in high school, Mr. Chill is now barely able to stifle his laughter. The entire class has stopped their work and turned their attention to the unfolding situation. Jimmy, is there a wild animal in that backpack? There sure is. Mr. Chill, ready to receive his punishment, and with the whole room waiting with bated breath, Jimmy pulls his backpack from the floor to his desk and unzips the main compartment a few inches. Frantic squeaking emanates from the bag, and a full-grown squirrel peeks its little head from the opening, eyes darting around the room full of suburban teenagers. The classroom loses its collective mind. Mr. Chill is doubled over and in tears. Students cannot breathe, they are laughing so hard. The squirrel is terrified at the spectacle and retreats into the safety of the backpack. I hate to have to do this, Jimmy, but I'd be in it deep if I didn't, says Mr. Chill as he picks up the classroom phone to summon building security, who come to confiscate the bag and later release the squirrel safely into the woods behind the school. They almost didn't let Jimmy walk at graduation for that little stunt. Thankfully, the administration came to its senses. Funny kid he was. I miss him. He thought it was a good idea to throw crumbled up paper at the biggest dude in class. The big guy was known for being a pretty chill dude and was sitting at his desk, minding his own business. He took the first few hits like a champ and ignored him, until the class clown started throwing bigger balls of paper at him. Mr. Big Guy told him, just so you know, you're going to eat the next paper ball you throw at me. Let us stop there for a moment, and I'll help you paint the picture in a fashion only an old Timmy story could. We were writing the year 2001 AD. There was a giant that towered at least 2 heads above everyone else, and was twice as wide as the ordinary kid should be. Imagine David and Goliath, but 14 years old, and with pimples. Well, let us continue. David gave Goliath a crap-eating grin and threw another ball made of crumbled up paper at the giant. But Goliath caught the fist-sized ball, jumped up from his chair and charged at David. Goliath then proceeded to pin David against the wall and shoved the paper ball in David's mouth. Goliath held him pinned against the wall for a few seconds while staring into his soul. At this point David had already started to tear up a bit, as every other 14-year-old would when being charged at by a giant. Goliath slowly put him down again, kept staring at him and roared out a very angry "Start chewing." And so David started chewing until the crumbled up paper was no more. Moral of the story? Don't frick with a giant. This will get buried but whatever. In 11th grade, in math class in the middle of a lecture, this guy poured a small amount of water on the guy in front of him. The guy he poured water on is huge, like 6 feet 5 inches 300 pounds huge. This guy jumps out of his seat and turns around. Before he even turns around, the guy who poured the water starts emptying the water bottle onto himself while screaming, "Look, IT's on ME2. IT's on ME2." Everyone snaps out of lecture mode, including the teacher, to witness what happened next. These two just had a staring contest for about 30 seconds. One cowering in fear, the other trying to instill more fear. Eventually the big guy sits back down and everyone continues learning math. He banged the teacher's daughter after he got detention. He also got video of it and showed some of the other guys in class. That's pretty hardcore. Kid was chewing gum in class and teacher asks, "What's in your mouth?" He responds, "What's in your wallet, freaking savage." Oh my god. Petie. Where to begin with Petie? Now I have to preface this by telling you that Petie no longer goes by that name and he is now a wonderful, hilarious, well-adjusted, thoughtful man that is going to school and managing a retail chain and all in all doing pretty well for himself. That said, elementary school with him was, I don't even know. My first distinct Petie memory was 3rd grade. We had been asked to pass out homework forward to turn in and suddenly we all hear this horrific crumpling sound. We all turn around and Petie is halfway through eating his homework. He did his homework to completion. He just didn't feel like turning it in, so naturally he ate it. It was also this year, though maybe it was 4th grade, that he broke his arm launching himself down a flight of stairs. 4th grade he fell in love with the new girl because she was the only one shorter than him. 5th grade he wasn't in my class. I went to a small K-8 school with only about 50 kids a grade, so there were 2 classes of each grade, but oh did I hear stories. He liked to climb onto the window seat and wrap himself in pillows and yell about his cocooning. He also would dump out half of his milk, fill the rest with water, and drink it every day. If I remember correctly, he called it his elixir of life. In 6th grade all of the desks were mushed together in one long conference style table. He liked to climb under this table, grab girls' ankles, and sing at the top of his lungs, "Gabriel Iglesias, I can be your hero baby." There were a ton more Petie stories, but this is what I remember off the top of my head. He was a legend. Man, we loved him. Petie, reign of chaos. Chugging 2-liter bottles of soda at lunch while being timed, only to turn green a few minutes later and hurl it all back up. Frickin' high school. In grade 9 gym we had this kid named Tomo, and as well was our teacher Mr. Natu. Weird names, I know. Anyways, Mr. Natu had a single golden rule. If you voice any sort of vulgarity, you have to do 10 push-ups. Now Tomo was hilarious in that he always did funny crap whether it was intentional or not. And best of all, he had no filter. One day during outdoor soccer, Tomo missed a pass and shouted, "Frick. 10 push-ups." Tomo reciprocates Mr. Natu. "Crap," says Tomo. 20 adds Mr. Natu. "What the heck? 30 push-ups." Tomo. "Dang it, Mr. Natu" stares at him with a grin and Tomo rolls his eyes as he closes in on the ground to proceed with the 40 push-ups. As I'm running by, Tomo says in a rather audible tone, "This is bulls," which Mr. Natu hears. 50 push-ups. Tomo. "Jesus Christ. Mr. Natu is a holy man." 60. Adds Mr. Natu once more. That's about as far as my memory of that instance goes, but I'm fairly certain he made it to 80 or 90 as a result of saying something that could be considered vulgarity. No less. It was extremely memorable. Tomo made gym class. During the math final we were allowed to use a calculator. He brought in his little sister's toy cash register. It took up most of the space on his desk and every button he pressed would go boink beep boop then khing when he hit enter. He only got through like 3 problems before getting kicked out, but every time I think about that I laugh. Pee into water bottles, then poured Mio, water flavorer, into them and gave them to people to drink. No one noticed unless they were told after finishing the drinks. Plugged a wireless mouse into the teacher's computer while her back was turned during a presentation. Proceeded to subtly move the cursor whenever she tried to use the mousepad. It turned out she was going through some things and had a bit of a breakdown, and eventually stormed out of the room mid-lesson. Grade 6 on a school camp, and this guy kept telling us that he had seen a porno where the girl was getting it doggy style and barking like a dog. We didn't find it funny at all, but he kept at it. We were in our bunks one night when he started it up again. This time with actions and sound effects, and we all burst out laughing, prompting him to continue with a grin on his face. The thing is, we weren't laughing at his joke but at the fact that the principal had popped bus head in moments after he started. Another time at boarding school, the class clown, who looked so much like a living Cabbage Patch Kid that you would swear he had his name tattooed on his butt, had got fed up with the girls upstairs. So just as everyone was getting ready for prep, 2 hours of homework, he walked out into the corridor and proclaimed, "I am an attention seeker. Look at me," when people came out to see what all the fuss was about, including the girls coming downstairs. He said thank you and then went and started. My math teacher was late at the start of that period class for a good 10 minutes, during which my friend Steve, class clown, had wandered up front of the room to the teacher's desk, where he went through the bag to the cheers of the boys and came out with the teacher's lunchbox. To the delight and the encouragement of the room, he ate the chocolate biscuits, sandwiches, and he pocketed the apple, then put the lunchbox back in the bag and returned to his seat, receiving high fives most of the way back to his seat beside me. When the teacher finally turned up, he got straight into math, during which my friend Steve had raised his hand for a question, or so I thought. When the teacher asked, "Yes, Steve," Steve said, "So while you were gone, insert my name, ate your lunch?" I told him not to, but he wouldn't listen to me. The whole room, including me, erupted in laughter. I couldn't believe the nerve of Steve, but I couldn't stop laughing either. As soon as Steve told the teacher this, he went quick as a flash into his bag and came out with the now empty lunchbox, to the whooping and yelling of the boys. He just started screaming at me, "How dare you, you little bastard, you think this is funny, get out of my class now." Now I was in hysterics during all this, the look of innocence on Steve's face, the beetroot red face of my raging teacher, and the howls of laughter from the class. The teacher was spitting his lines at me, frothing at the mouth. He didn't give a dang about me trying to explain what really happened. He just ended up screaming at me, "Out, get out," and the kicker here was during the whole time he was raging at me, Steve was still talking in a very casual tone, winding the teacher up even more. He wouldn't listen to me, sir. I said, "Hey, you can't do that, it's not your lunch," but he said he didn't care and just kept eating your food, and I tried to tell him but he wouldn't listen. Those bulls comments from Steve was what had me in hysterics as I packed up my stuff and headed out, leaving my class in uproar and close to rioting. Freaking Steve interrupted a class by running into the room from the class he was in, pretending to ride a horse and yelling Frankie Dettori while his teacher chased him around. The day before graduation, he and 2 of his friends performed this plan. The 2 friends went to the headmaster and asked if they could take a photo of him. He was delighted and took some time adjusting his tie and hair and stuff while they waited outside. They said they wanted him to pose in front of the school for a good memorabilia photo. So he posed where they asked him and smiled. What he didn't know was that the 3rd guy was on the roof. The administration part of the school was a low, 1-floor building with a flat roof, with a bucket of water. The headmaster was drenched. They got a good photo. You could see the headmaster draw his breath to just roar at them, and then he saw the funny side of it and just laughed at it instead, with no hard feelings. He even complimented them on the brilliance of the plan. Also, of course, while all this happened, roughly 50 kids were watching. While using the individual booths and out of view of the teacher to practice during German class on the 2nd floor, He climbed out the window and momentarily hung by his fingertips before letting go. Moments later he came back in, nodded to the teacher at the front of the room and went to his booth. He then proceeded to do it again. The look on the teacher's face the second time he came in the classroom was priceless. For me the hysterical part was those fingers pausing before release. I always wondered how the class below reacted. Took upskirt pictures on his last day. He didn't know then that it was his last day though. The initiative was entirely with the school on that one. Snorted a roll of crushed Smarties in the back of biology. Started spazzing on the floor. Teacher looked down the aisle, shrugged, then continued on teaching while the guy was bleeding from the nose. In choir there were these two buttholes and the basses who went by Quinn and Cody. I have two stories about them. The teacher was working with a chamber choir one day and turned her back to everyone who was in concert choir. I don't quite remember what the conversation was about, but one thing led to another, and Quinn ended up with a third student's phone up his butt. On a different day, we had sectionals, and the basses were sent off to a separate room. So Quinn has this bag of Skittles that he snuck into the room with us. So when we get called back into the choir room, Cody takes the Skittles and shoves them in his boxers to look like he had a boner. He walks in all confident, and when the teacher's back is turned, he pulls out the Skittles, takes a handful, gives the bag back to Quinn, and when she turns back around, both Quinn and Cody are standing there with crap-eating grins eating crotch Skittles. Last story is totally unrelated to those two, but still took place in choir. So this kid, let's call him Cameron, he walks in covered in blue sticky notes. When the teacher tells him to take them all off, he does this whole routine where he pats himself down and searches for any he missed. The funniest thing that he didn't get detention for that. The detention was for taking sticky notes from the social studies teacher he had the period before. Welp, if Cameron, Quinn, or Cody happen upon this comment on this thread, I salute you. Also don't hurt me for calling you buttholes. He proved that when you light a cherry bomb firecracker and flush it really does cause all the toilets in the school to overflow. That was freaky. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.